Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. One of the benefits of living for a while is you get to see how the story ends. It's sometimes a little depressing. If you're over 40, you probably remember Robert Reich. He was Bill Clinton's labor secretary. He was a liberal among moderates in that administration, but a thoughtful and engaging person. His views weren't mainstream, but he certainly wasn't stupid or a hater. Well, that was all before Trump. Like a lot of people in our ruling class, Robert Reich is now a completely different person. Just the other day, Reich wrote that the entire Trump presidency ought to be annulled, not just ended prematurely, that's no longer radical enough, but erased from history, forgotten by decree. America must reset to the first Monday in November 2016, like none of it ever happened. We'd have to retroactively Photoshop an awful lot of pictures. But according to Reich, it's the only remedy. Reality isn't tolerable. It should be banned. Reich was dead serious, apparently. Keep in mind that 20 years ago, people considered him impressive. Some still do, which tells you a lot about the state of our intellectual leaders. People still defend John Brennan, too, even after he revealed on television that there's something seriously wrong with him. Officials who run the CIA ought to be sober and reasonable and even-tempered. It's too powerful a job with too little oversight and too little accountability for a wacko. That would be dangerous for the country. And yet, over the weekend, there was Brennan once again charging a political opponent with a death penalty offense on the basis of zero evidence. Watch.
I've been having a hell of a time here on this show trying to get my guests to say the word treason. I think the president is guilty of that, and you used terms like that. You said after Helsinki it was nothing short of treasonous, which sounds to me like treasonous.
Treasonous is defined as a betrayal of trust as well as aiding and abetting the enemy. And so that was the word that came to my mind.
Things are accelerating fast. Trump as a racist became Trump as a traitor, which has now become Trump as a non-person who must be erased from our collective memory. The left is officially out of epithets. All that's left is physical harm. Who will be the first to call for that? It feels inevitable at this point. Mark Steyn is an author and columnist, and he joins us tonight. So what do you make of annulling the Trump presidency, Mark?
Well, I think this is rather like the famous episode of Dallas, where after they wrote off an entire season as not having gone anywhere, and Pam Ewing stepped into the shower, and there was Bobby Ewing, who was supposed to be dead, restored to life. And Robert Reich seems to basically be proposing the same solution here, that Robert Reich will step into the shower, and there will be President Hillary Clinton magnificently. I hope that's not a bit too vivid for you. Actually, as I was halfway through that image, it suddenly got a bit too vivid for me. But that does actually reflect the level of denial here. If you recall, going back to November 2016, we heard all this stuff about, America is unique in having the peaceful transfer of power, which I don't quite accept. I mean, generally speaking, when they get a new prime minister in Denmark, they don't throw the old one off the parliament building or anything. There are other countries that have peaceful transfers of power.
Yes,
what's interesting here is that actually they can't accept that, and the denialism, which back a year and a half ago was just like with fake Newsweek covers showing the rightful president, is now extending to former cabinet secretaries actually arguing for the erasure of the historical record and sort of resetting things to year zero. And actually that is harmful to the so-called peaceful transfer of power, and in that sense Reich should be ashamed of himself.
So, but that's kind of the key. Here you have not just some pundit on MSCNN or whatever, but here you have a former cabinet secretary and a well-regarded one. I mean, I know him, and he is a legitimately smart guy. And then a former CIA director who's not a legitimately smart guy, but still a former CIA director. I mean, these are the pillars of the establishment. What is it, macro question, about Trump that drives the ruling class to say things like this, irrational things, crazy things?
Well, I think there is a general presumption that it's not just that he won, but that he shouldn't have won. And therefore, because he shouldn't have won, he cannot really have won. And that's why you have to have this this basically this dance of speculation. Now, the treason accusation, I think, is actually, for a start, treason is giving aid and comfort to the enemy, and actually Russia isn't the enemy at the moment. In fact, it was President Obama who mocked the very idea that Russia was even a sort of geopolitical rival of any kind. So we're not at war with Russia. The idea that that is actually possible of rising to the level of treason is faintly absurd. But I think it's the need to delegitimize, and you know, a couple of cycles ago that just meant mocking the other guy as being stupid and being unworthy of it and all the rest of it. But it's actually gone on to something far more dangerous, which is actually delegitimizing the entire system. When you have major political figures saying that, in effect, the peaceful transfer of power is not possible, it can't possibly happen, therefore, if it does happen, it's illegitimate, it's not so much this or that president that they're delegitimizing, but actually the very possibility of civilized self-government by free people.
So if the supposed adults on the left, Reich and Brennan and many others, are talking themselves into this frenzy where each round becomes more extreme than the last, how long before someone convinces himself that, you know, we need to storm the White House, we need to take action, like physical action here? That's the terminus of this, right? How could it not be?
Well, that's what makes this at a certain level ridiculous. I mean, for Bill Maher, just before that bit with Brennan, said that this was the third biggest crisis in in America's history. The Revolutionary War, and then the Civil War, and now this. Well, what are you doing about it, Bill? You're having another decaf macchiato and finding another Canadian singer-songwriter to date. You're not pledging your life, your fortune, and your sacred honor, are you? And by the way, speaking of treason, if he is dating another Canadian singer-songwriter, that's like George Washington dating a United Empire loyalist at the time of the Revolutionary War. So he's not even serious about what he's saying, and that's what makes it decadent. If either this is, as Bill Maher says, the third great crisis in American history, or it's just something you guys are talking about over your Sauvignon Blanc for a giggle. But exactly. if they're not serious about it, they shouldn't be saying it, because somebody will take it seriously, and that's the real danger.
Meanwhile, the middle class dies, and nobody cares. Mark Steyn, thank you very much for that. Great to see you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.